Unfortunately, we are witnessing these days several developments that put constitutionalism and the respect for the rule of law in question. People's civic rights, such as the right to assembly and the right to peacefully demonstrate and petition, and also the right to view legal processes when suspected of crimes, must be respected. Zimbabwe should show that it genuinely has made a break from the past.
Your Excellency, you referred human rights. However, this platform was for corruption.
This is the free talk.
Zimbabwe has had an uneasy relationship with the European Union. It has had an equally uneasy relationship with the outgoing EU delegation ambassador, His Excellency Timo O'Connor. He has been viewed as controversial. He has said some statements that have rubbed government officials in the wrong way. But he has also worked with Zimbabwean communities to ensure that there is sustainability in terms of food and nutrition, especially in the marginalized communities. Now, Ambassador Timo has been at the center of assisting Zimbabwean government fight corruption. And this delegation has said that Zimbabwe's problems are not because of sanctions, but are because of massive corruption. Now, after this tour of duty, we sit down with Ambassador Timo to discuss his time in Zimbabwe, the controversies, the highs, the lows, and the future of EU-Zimbabwe relations. Now, this is the Free Talk with me, your host, Dara Bintlang. Join me just after this break for more with Ambassador Timo O'Connor. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us on this, the Free Talk, in partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Now, Ambassador, your stay in Zimbabwe has been somewhat been said was a controversial stay. You have had rub-ons with government officials, and it's coming to an end. How has it been for you?
Well, thanks very much, Blessed, for inviting me for this interview, first of all. I have really enjoyed my stay in Zimbabwe. I think it's really been a good country to stay for a couple of years, both for myself personally and for my family. We really enjoyed it. It's beautiful. And above all, the Zimbabwean people have been extremely welcoming and friendly, and the hospitality has been great. And we've traveled around the country and seen the beauty, and indeed met with the people and seen a lot of smiling faces. The thing that you see in social media, or you experience in social media, and the things that you experience on the ground are quite different, because when you interact personally, it's been almost always very, very positive. So it's been a good experience. Professionally also very, very interesting. I think you used the word controversial. I realize that some people think that way, but I wouldn't regard it that way. It's impossible to please everybody at the same time. So of course, when you stand up for your positions, for your what the European Union stands for, some people are uncomfortable with that, and there's no way around it. You know, it is. I would not be doing my job if I would not take strong positions on issues that the European Union feels strongly about. So if people think that that has been sometimes controversial, that's their interpretation of the situation. For me, it has been about me trying to fulfill my mandate as in the best way that I could.
Yeah. I'll take you to the controversial part of it, where the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission was, you were signing an MOU at some sports club, and you stood up and you made a very controversial statement at that point that was then rebutted or responded to immediately by the Minister of Justice. Do you still remember that?
I do remember that occasion. There were some cartoons were drawn after that as well. So yeah, no, it got a lot of publicity, but I certainly still stand for, you know, whatever I said at that moment in time, at that occasion. Yeah.
Part of your work has been involved in trying to enlighten that the EU does not have sanctions against Zimbabwe. I remember a number of interviews that we have had here on the Free Talk with you, and we're talking about sanctions versus corruption. Did you think in that regard, during your time as head of the mission, of the delegation, do you think that you managed to drive that home?
Well, I still encounter a lot of people and get these comments, particularly in the social media, that clearly I have not been able to convince them of the matter. But for us, it's a matter of fact. For us, the use of restrictive measures is a policy instrument, and you've seen, for example, in the when Russia attacked Ukraine, those instruments were used very widely against the Russian Federation after this heinous act of theirs of attacking an independent sovereign country. So it is an instrument that the European Union has been using in certain occasions. As regards Zimbabwe, it's a human rights related instrument, so it reflects our interpretation of what's happening in the human rights situation in the country. And as you have seen also, you know, when people are talking about the economical effect of the measures, when you look at the very limited scope of those measures, you know, I don't think that argument holds water. Another argument is that they are illegal because they are not UN sanctioned measures. But again, when you look at it, at the legislative basis, it is only we are telling about to European operators what they are supposed to do. There's nothing extraterritorial about them. We are not telling what Zimbabweans ought to do. We are just, you know, putting restrictions on European operators of, you know, avoiding some things. So again, you know, this illegality issue that has been oftentimes portrayed that the European Union measures would be illegal. You know, that's again another argument that I would refute. So there are these, and then there's also, I think, at times a purposeful conflation of these measures with other things that are happening, for example, in the banking sector, or the issues about, you know, access to credit, you know, which are related to the debt situation and the area situation. So at times, I think in these discussions, you know, things get murky. And you know, when, you know, some causes and effects are pointed at, you know, it's not really, you know, you're not really talking about EU measures.
But this issue around sanctions and around your EU relation with Zimbabwe, how have they what part have you played as an ambassador before you have left here to make sure that there's some convergence, that these measures go, so that Zimbabweans begin to enjoy full and cordial relations with EU?
Well, you shouldn't exaggerate my role in that. The decision on the restrictive measures is taken by unanimity by the EU member states, currently 27 member states in the Council, every year. And so it is really a decision at the high political level done by the ministers of these 27 countries. So obviously myself and the delegation have a role to play in trying to read what is the situation in the country, together with the EU member states present, but ultimately then the decision is taken in Brussels. It is a multifaceted and a comprehensive process of how we come into these conclusions. So obviously I play a part, but that part shouldn't be exaggerated.
But we hear most of the times, that a certain opposition leader has influenced the decision of EU or the United States of America to put sanctions or measures on Zimbabwe. But you're talking that this is far more than just one person or two people. Can you just explain that? Because it baffles the mind of someone to hear that Ndayibiti is the one who actually called on the whole EU to put measures on Zimbabwe. Is he that powerful?
No. That's, it's not a question of a single person telling us what to do or what not. That would be quite an awkward situation, for such an important policy decision. No, like I said, it's a comprehensive interpretation of what is happening on the ground. You're looking at various reports of the human rights situation, and you're looking at what has transpired in the country over the year before we come to that. And then ultimately it's also a process of, agreeing amongst the 27. So allocating, the responsibility or the power to an individual person that he could or she could dictate what the EU should be doing in this regard is actually absurd.
And I would want to also just understand and appreciate, you spoke about Russia going into a sovereign nation, that is Ukraine. Zimbabwe makes the same argument. It says that whatever measures you're doing are affecting the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. So if I'm going to put you on the same level with Russia, would that be fair?
I don't think so. I don't think this. I think you're really comparing very, very different issues. First of all, of course, if we wouldn't recognize Zimbabwe's sovereignty as an independent nation, I should not be here. That would go against, all the international principles and against all the tenets of diplomacy. So obviously that's a matter of fact where we start from. So that's the first point of departure. So, like I said, as terms of the restrictive measures, there's nothing extraterritorial about that. It's not the kind of a colonial act that you would come into a country and start dictating what you're doing. It is about European operators, and mind you, extremely limited at the moment. In comparison to what it might have been also historically. So that's one thing. Then another issue which has been talked about how we operate in the country in terms of trying to influence the governance and human rights situation through cooperation in full transparency and oftentimes in cooperation with the government, and then also when we are advocating for human rights issues, it's based on our values as the European Union, as our policy approach, but also and primarily on the internationally agreed principles, starting with the UN Charter on human rights, which most countries in the world, including Zimbabwe, has adhered to. The regional instruments, the African Charter on democracy and governance, for example, another instrument at Zimbabwe, and the Zimbabwean constitution. So, picking up controversies from these issues. For us, it is about about discussing about issues that we have agreed to, and then following up on those in terms of implementation.
The African Union, SADC, have all joined hands, and they have said that the restrictive measures, though limited as they are hamstringing the Zimbabwean economy, and that they have not achieved their intended purpose. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say when you look at the Zimbabwean economy, there's many other issues affecting the status of the economy. When you're talking about, when you look at the use of public funds, you have the Auditor General's reports, that are stating quite major issues what is happening. When you're talking with would-be investors to the country, they are not talking about restrictive measures. They are not talking about sanctions. They are talking about the overall business environment. First of all, repatriation of profits, how the currency framework works, for example, now. Security of tenure, especially as regards land issues and agriculture, but also otherwise. Transparency of procurement, level competitive playing field. So we did have when I arrived to the country, we had quite a few business delegations coming into the country, and who were quite keen on looking into what would be what prospects are there in Zimbabwe. And we had the measures still there, and they were even wider at the moment than they are today, and they really didn't figure in the discussions. So, yeah, I think the issues affecting the economy in the country are coming from somewhere else, and not from the measures that we have.
Mm-hmm. But as you leave, what is the economic relation between Zimbabwe and the EU? Well,
there is economic interaction. We would like to have much more of it. If I would start with some of the very positive aspects of our relations, which are oftentimes ignored, relate to that we have a good framework in place for trade. The Economic Partnership Agreement, which is Zimbabwe is in this regional grouping, together with some other Eastern and Southern African states. And in that grouping, we guarantee a duty-free and quota-free access to Zimbabwean produce to the EU market. There's some promising issues coming up on the basis of that access. We see the exports of horticultural produce, particularly to the European Union, are growing. So it's positive. It's still rather marginal when you look at the overall trade. Zimbabwe-EU trade is approximately only a bit more than 5% of the overall trade of Zimbabwe. So there's much more scope to grow. But indeed, there are things happening in the horticultural sector. You see that opportunities are taken: citrus, avocado, tea, cut flowers, peas, and many other things are coming to the European Union market. I've seen them in my home country, in my market in Finland. It puts a smile on my face when I see Zimbabwean produce coming. And I think agriculture is great from the perspective that when you look at the extractive industries such as mining, when you dig that gold out of the ground, it's gone forever. You're not going to get it back. You ship it somewhere, and when it runs out, it runs out. Whereas agriculture, of course, you renew. It's a replenishable, sustainable produce. So I think I'm very partial to the fact that agriculture is one of those areas where something positive is happening in our trade. So there's room for that. Investments from the European Union, we would of course want to have more of them. But like I said, there's a sense of caution from what I've understood, of course, it's more for my member states who are promoting their countries' investments and trade, and we from the European Union are more interested in providing them a conducive framework for European Union Zimbabwe.
What's driving the caution? What's the...
Well, I mentioned the things about, matters around fair level playing field, transparency, security of tenure, profits repatriation, these kind of things. So money, of course, moves around. It looks for places where it is profitable to operate, and where it's safe and predictable to operate. So this kind of predictability and transparency aspect of getting investors into place is extremely important.
Is Europe not worried about China? Because China appears doesn't really care about these things. Because aren't you now taking the back seat to the Chinese?
Well, this is an argument that's been used that if you stick to your values and your principles and everything, then other countries would take over and you lose the game. I don't see it in that way. China does positive things. Their contribution to infrastructure development and so forth are something that Africa needs also. So it's about who has what to offer, and it's not so much about crowding out. What is though important is the level playing field and transparency part of the issues, because in Europe governments don't beef up and make it easier for their businesses to operate, in the sense that there are some instruments of how to access credit and so forth, but it's all very transparent and it's all regulated, and the procurement is clear, and the debt arrangements and so forth are supposed to follow a number of principles. So what I think is important for European countries and European companies is that the transparency and the level playing field. And I think it's very much in the interest of Zimbabwe and African countries as a whole, also to have that you get the best value. Price is of course important, but that you get also best value and sustainability, the social and environmental aspects to be taken into account of, and also that you would have sustainability and good quality.
Do you think African governments, from what we have seen, care about those values that you're talking about?
Well, like I said, they are universally agreed values, almost universally agreed values. So I think it's something that we should care about and that we should remind each other about. Sometimes I get questions about things. What are things about what are happening in Europe, and I think that's fair. It's like we are also adhering to these values. So it's not. It should be a question about when people say that it's a question of respect, that you shouldn't touch on these issues. I think it's a question of mutual respect. Okay, let's discuss. We also have issues. Like we are nobody's perfect, I'm clearly in social media. Some people think that I'm arrogant, and I regret that. That it comes out of that way. But I think it's something that we have. An individual person's right should be respected, and that's a key ingredient for a good life for a human being, and we should remind ourselves, as from government to government and from the EU institutions to governments also, that this is something that we agreed we should follow it up.
I want to take you to some of the controversial aspects that have been raised around Zimbabwe. The proposed PVO bill, the EU has had issues with it, but this is a sovereign law in Zimbabwe. Why would you have issues with it?
Well, the starting point, of course, is that we fully recognize that Zimbabwe is sovereign and can draft the legislation that is fit, and then so that's the starting point. But again, one then would look, okay, what does that mean? This is the PVO bill, and like you said, it's an important thing. When you look at the in February, the High Representative of the European Union, our highest foreign policy person, issued a statement on behalf of the 27 member states, so all the EU member states, where we addressed this concern about the PVO bill, that that we do have concerns. And the issue there is that, again, if we are looking at these universally agreed principles, which includes also political rights and freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and then looking at the critique of that proposed legislation in that is coming from the Zimbabwean civil society and some other actors, we thought, well, okay, this thing is happening. There clearly are concerns about. We were also having discussions about that issue with government representatives, where we were also then where we had quite detailed discussions about the whole draft legislation and how it looked like, and our concern is that many of the actors, the civil society particularly, that would be affected by the law, are saying that it's not constitutional. And Zimbabwean constitution, again, is then referring to these international principles as well from the human rights. So I think it's part and parcel of this discussion about what have we agreed to internationally, almost universally, and how is that then implemented in practice. I would need to add that civil society is an important partner for the European Union in matters of development cooperation, also advocacy, because it's somebody. It's civil society is also keeping the government in check, and free civil society is an expression of that freedom of assembly and freedom of thought and freedom of expression. We like to see the world and cooperation in a sense that it's not only about governments, but it's also about how people to people contact and civil society to civil society contacts, legislature to legislature contacts. So from all these that's coming from there, we have had these concerns that if that bill would be put into place like it is, what would that mean to that freedom of the civil society? And so it's a rather important issue for us.
You've been accused rather of trying to use civil society, His Excellency, to effect regime change in Zimbabwe. In fact, there's those who are pushing for that PVO Act are actually saying that civil society has now become your third hand to removing the government of Zimbabwe.
I think this discussion has a history in Zimbabwe. Like also the former president was saying that civil society is the face of colonialism or something, imperialism or something like that. Now, of course, I completely deny that. And if actually, one would be pushing for regime change, then I would have no business to be in the country anymore. That would be going totally against all the rules of diplomacy, and you have these accusations. But first of all, our cooperation with the civil society is fully transparent. Every month we send a report to the Ministry of Finance about what we do with our development cooperation funding. When we launch programs, we also sign financing agreements with the Ministry of Finance where we describe what are we doing in our cooperation. In addition to that, there are these global calls for proposals, but again, they are fully transparent. So everything that you need to know is you can find in the internet. So there's nothing like underhand or scheming or anything like that. And by the way, I don't, from my interactions from the civil society as well, I don't see, at least with those partners that we have, I find these accusations about regime change, and I haven't encountered that in those activities where I've been in any way.
How does these allegations affect, if they do, the diplomatic relations between EU and Zimbabwe, when government officials are openly accusing you of being funding terror, of dabbling into local politics, when you are sitting there and denying it?
Well, when you have these, it depends on, of course, of who is saying. If it's a private individual, if it's a political party, then they have the freedom of saying whatever, of course, and the government, of course, can representatives can also say whatever. The important is what is the consequence, and for us it's a bit more about wondering about where is this coming from, why is it said, and we have also been taking these issues up in our interaction then with when these allegations have been made. So what is this now about? Should we clarify something? It's more of a question about why is this being said, and is there a misunderstanding?
And I'll come to the issue of arrests, political players who have been arrested in Zimbabwe. Some have been denied bail, people like Job Scala, Godfrey Stole. What has been your reading of these events that have been unfolding?
Yeah, there has been a number of these cases in Zimbabwe where critically minded people have not been granted bail, and of course these are issues that we follow. These are issues also that influence our internal discussions, and it is a question that then you question the fairness of justice of when you look at the charges that have been posed, and what is then the legal procedure after that, and is it fair? And we do take note of the kind of cases that you referred to.
Going to 2023, are you worried about the Zimbabwean political landscape as we go towards a general election?
Well, of course, the Zimbabwean political landscape is very polarized, and it has been like that for a long time. I think the fact that we had a peaceful campaign period prior to the 2018 elections was something positive, and I hope that will be replicated. So the fact that prior to those elections, the aftermath, of course, was regrettable, that there was this violence on the 1st of August. And then there was this controversy with the results and so forth. But I think Zimbabwe had a good experience prior to the 2018 elections, with the campaigning period being free, and different political actors could reach out and have meetings and so forth. So I think I would like to see very much, and hope to see, it would be a replication of that kind of freedom of campaigning and so on. I think that's very important. So that's one thing. And if that would happen, then I think it would also ease up a lot of those tensions around it, because people should be allowed to voice their political opinions freely. And I think this probably would be a key of achieving a positive electoral environment.
Is there any support that you're going to give Zimbabwe to run the elections? I know in the last elections you gave a lot of support to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Is there anything that's coming this time around?
We do have plans of supporting the electoral process, so that's in the pipeline. I can't say very much about that because we don't have the final signatures on everything. But we want to be engaged. We want to support the elections and the electoral process, and we also want to discuss with the government, how we go about it. Again in all full transparency. So so plans are there, and I think it's very important. Governance is one of the 3 priority areas for future cooperation, and democratic processes such as elections are a key part of that. And of course we have the electoral observation mission from 2018 and their recommendations to build on, so we have been, so like you said, in 2018 and even after that we have invested in these processes, and we are keen to continue with that.
Maybe your last words as you bid farewell to the people of Zimbabwe, those that you have worked with, those that want to see you gone, and those who would rather you have stayed. Maybe I'll just give you that opportunity to talk to the people of Zimbabwe and bid them farewell.
Well, what can I say? I'm very, very much coming to the end of the last days in the country, and it is with I'm starting to be quite emotional and quite sad, because despite of what I know that some people think of me, I myself have had a very positive experience in the country, and like I said in the beginning, together with my family we have truly enjoyed living here and seeing the country, encountering its wonderful people and all those great experiences. The one regret I have, that was the COVID pandemic that came in between, and that took a big chunk of my time, and I would have wanted to see much more of the country, visit many more of our projects, and meet many more of the beneficiaries, and I regret that some of those chances were taken. But I think Zimbabwe is a wonderful country in terms of its diversity, in terms of natural resources, the beauty. People always talk about Victoria Falls, but there's so much more. All the national parks that you have, the mountains, the cultural heritage, Great Zimbabwe Economy ruins, the cave paintings. So it is truly a land of many treasures, and nature has also blessed it in a way that it's agriculturally fertile. It has a lot of water, which is not the case in many other countries. So Zimbabwe has, and of course not to mention the mineral wealth that is there. So I think Zimbabwe has a bright future in front of us, from front of it, and I really wish the best for the people of Zimbabwe, the wonderful people of Zimbabwe, and I do think Zimbabwe has a bright future in front of it.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us here on this Free Talk with proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. We do wish you the best in your next posting that you have been given, and hope that you will enjoy it as well as you've enjoyed Zimbabwe, and that you will also not forget your friends in Zimbabwe. We thank you very much. Now, this was outgoing EU Ambassador Timo Alkonen, who will be leaving Zimbabwe, but has been the head of the EU delegation and has been leading amazing projects on humanitarian issues, especially to deal with food security in marginalized communities. He has also been taking the lead in assisting the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission in terms of dealing and capacitating with it to deal with corruption in this country. He has had his finer moments in the political circles, where he has been accused of meddling in the politics of Zimbabwe and the constitution of Zimbabwe. He has been accused rather of trying to effect a regime change agenda in this country. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
And wish you the best.
Thanks.
Beautiful.